Well, welcome. This is the National Art Education Association's Women's Caucus year of celebrating our 50th anniversary. And we're going to have these bi-monthly, beginning with this one here, on the second Saturday of the month. And the gatherings will include presentations and dialogue, really focused on feminist art education activism. And you can see the list here of the different dates here. So it is, takes us basically like a year and a half, really, a year and a few months. And that we will have different people facilitating as well as, a lot of people joining. If you see a date there, and welcome everybody. If you see a date that that you would like to actually present some feminist activism, contact that particular facilitator. And if you don't have their contact me and I will connect you to them. Today, I'm going to focus on four particular feminist actions that I have been involved, but all of these involved many other people, and some of them will be here today. And the schedule then that you see on the poster, basically, these beautiful posters that Carly Sherman created, and I think they're gorgeous. And they sort of reference the lobby activism book and some of the design of that cover there as well. Maybe you can't see it as closely because it's kind of overlapped. It's like red on the black down there, but there are going to be four main. I'm going to tell you what it's saying there because it's kind of small on your screen, perhaps. And I think if there's some chats in here. Oh yeah, go Carly, great. Okay. You also are welcome to open up your mic and say things as well. I may not, especially if you're trying to tell me something through the chat and I don't quite catch it because I'm not looking at it as I'm speaking here. But today we'll have four main topics. And each of the topic begins on the hour and the half an hour. And there will be presentations for those first 15 minutes, some of them, several different people, like 3 minutes and such, to allow 15 minutes for discussion. And then we'll switch to the next topic. So the first topic is a feminist glitch art pedagogy, and we'll begin that in a moment. And the second topic is art encounters with Linda Stein's Sexism series. The third topic is Art plus Feminism Wikistorming. And the fourth topic is the founding and carrying through for 19 years, the Visual Culture and Gender Journal. So each of them will be presenting them in terms of activism. And with that, I'm going to begin with the first topic here. And like I said, we'll have like a good 15 minutes for dialogue about this. So this I'm going to be presenting with Maggie Rose Condit Summerson, who is is here right now, and we'll be presenting our development of feminist glitch pedagogy, and particularly in the teaching of undergrads we both in our different courses in art education and women's gender and sexuality studies. The intention of our development of this curricular approach or feminist glitch pedagogy is to raise learners' critical consciousness by challenging heteropatriarchal norms and normalized whiteness. Main focus, which are great, really broad. Glitch feminism centers women, queer, trans, BIPOC, artists and cultural producers, disruptors, and is aimed for intersectional critiques of systems of oppression as they operate through digital culture, and highlights practices of and opportunities for digital lived experiences. Kind of keeping up with the admin here. There we go. Feminist pedagogies overall, Maggie Rose and I posit, is feminist activism, as the facilitation intends to disrupt the status quo of hierarchical power systems and concerns political and social change toward equitable and social just policies and practices. Glitch feminist art pedagogy seeks to raise critical consciousness through fluid encounters with feminist cultural production, cultivating learners' experiential knowledge by emphasizing lived experiences and raising questions about dominant narratives. In the case here of Woman House 2022, the focus is surrounding gender, sexuality, home, family, and belonging. And so in a general education course on interpreting art experiences from social cultural perspectives, that's the focus of the course. In the art installations of the 19 artists in the Woman House 2022 project, gender and race differences were pronounced, and the students ranged in age from first semester students to eighth semester. And they were in this class, about 20 students. They ranged from criminology, biobehavioral health, history, global international studies, women's gender and sexuality studies, psychology, nursing, engineering, agricultural sciences, earth and mineral sciences, English education, anthropology, labor and human sciences, mathematics, and arts and architecture pre-majors. So you could see there was quite a range of students in here, and most of them is a gen ed course that serves the writing across the curriculum component that is required from all these different majors, but they can choose different courses. Many of them chose this course. And so this Woman House stories were the focus. Now, and then I have the QR code and the URL there if you'd like to look at what's going on there. And I'm just kind of going to do a few highlights here. And then Maggie Rose will jump in. So media theorist Jean Baudelaire, concerned with the discursive turn of reality being overly saturated with socially constructed meanings, defines simulacra as when, quote, simulation is no longer that of a territory, a referential being, or a substance, into quotes. So Baudelaire categorizes the breakdown of the image into simulation via four successful phases. And so we bring a feminist glitching to the phases by way of Legacy Russell's Glitch Feminist Manifesto, introduced earlier, but particularly published in 2020. And so it really began really in 2012, an online publication. So in these four phases of simulacra, the image, the number one, the image first reflects reality, a hegemonic normative, socially inscribed reality. Then second, it disrupts that reality. And third, attempts to the absences within hegemonic notions of reality. And finally, the image remakes normative reality from embodied lived experiences of groups historically marginalized in our project of Glitch Feminist Art Pedagogy of intersectional counter-narratives to raise critical consciousness of the normalized whiteness and to challenge heteropatriarchy. So these are, we basically just glitched Baudelaire's four stages here, and what I just described is a grounding of feminist glitch pedagogy. Now, many of you know that Woman House evolved from the feminist art program in a college level art program for women developed in the 1970s by Judy Chicago at Fresno State College, and a conference and exhibition in Fresno Women's Space in 1971, which led to the move and further development of the feminist art program at the California Institute of the Arts in Valencia. And there we go. And so the organizers of the feminist art program, Miriam Shapiro and Judy Chicago, they facilitated a large-scale project working with artists and students in the feminist art program to deal with problems women faced in being recognized as artists, with art world gatekeepers dismissing art by women based in their embodied experiences and created in their multi-purpose art studio workspaces in their homes while attending to their children, house care duties, and part-time low-income jobs. So the feminist art program decided to simulate homemaking activities towards feminist simulacra proportions. Feminist glitching recognizes increasing blurriness between life on and offline and the ways the mutual digital selfhood and network building might offer opportunities for resistance and coalition through digital modes of creation. So you can see here on the images, the 2022 Woman House used the same sort of invitation of the doily there, which we picked up on one of the lobby activism events, the use of the doily kind of from this. But also there's some interesting themes of the mannequins. Only in 2022, they're actually, the technology allows you to create the mannequin itself. So many overlaps, so much to share here, but we're going to move on here to give you a sense of what the students did. So in interviewing the 19 artists, Maggie Rose and I went to New Mexico, Belen, New Mexico, where this house is in 2022 in June. And we interviewed, and then from these hour-long interviews, it's a bigger research project, we then made excerpts that are very useful in a classroom because they might be like 3 minutes long. Some of them are 2 minutes, and I don't think any is greater than 5 minutes. Most of them are 3 or 4 minutes, and enough to be able to play and then have a discussion. And so we have on the page for each one of these 19 artists, we have keywords and a question or prompt. And so the prompt for this one here, 7 rules a day, and Maggie Rose will share a little bit more about the room itself. But the prompt is, what do you fear doing because of rules you were taught? And in a women's gender and sexuality studies, this was about 30 students, and I was the guest. They came into the arts cottage where I was talking, and 30 people raised their hand. They all had something to say about this. And you can see, one thing I fear doing is walking alone after dark. There's issues of gender and race that can be seen in the kinds of lived experiences that the students have here. So just giving a sample of some of the work that came out of this. And also I asked them to do in sort of a series of assignments and projects to do visual responses to those prompts. And then they would look at each other's and such. So here's a couple non-art majors visual response to one of the prompts that had to do with reproductive justice and why is it important. And so, and then another prompt from another artist room, what's my relationship with my bed and what if my bed could talk? So you can see some of the artwork here. And then we also took it to with an undergrad student that's working on an honors thesis with this multimodal mural in which these are smaller pieces that can be placed on the table, but then brought together here. So it actually was like 2 different classes in this large group of a College of Education students that participated. And in that case, there was a whole bunch of them, I don't know, 50 or so in the room, and did a few where projecting large and had them answer just to get familiar with this. And then they put on headphones and chose which of the 19 rooms they wanted to go to. And then they painted on this part of the mural that was sitting on their table with the paint. So this ends up involving quite a few students. And this particular modular mural will be hung in a hotel here in State College, which are often just filled with people coming for the football and everything like that. So we feel like we'll reach a lot of people with that. And so that's just a couple of my experiences with introducing feminist glitch pedagogy. And now Maggie Rose, if you want to pick up on what you did.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie. I'm a 4th-year PhD candidate at Penn State in the dual title with Art Education and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. So drawing inspiration from the Woman House stories as a model for creating participatory augmented reality encounters, I developed a project with 40 undergraduate students, again, from a really wide assortment of majors enrolled in my fall 2022 Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies course called Representation of Women and Gender in Art, Literature, and Popular Cultures. So during this project, students, we visited the Palmer Museum of Art on the Penn State campus multiple times to experience the special exhibition that was up at the time that was celebrating the Palmers' 50th anniversary called Looking at Who We Are. So I asked groups of learners to develop a participatory prompt and a discussion question, emulating our process in the Woman House project, related to their chosen artwork that would become part of their augmented reality encounters. So a prompt that peers in their class, but also future museum visitors might respond to help stimulate critical conversations about the socio-political issues emerging in the artworks. So I encourage learners to develop these open-ended questions that would help folks connect to their own experiences through the works. So my intention for this step was to place students in the role of feminist educator, to decenter myself as the only holder of feminist knowledges and the sole figure responsible for forming and posing questions. To encourage them to think about how they might engage the public in dialogues, excuse me, which raise critical consciousness surrounding the feminist themes we've been exploring throughout the course. So particularly in intersectionality, lived experience, and practices of shared resistance. So each group worked to develop their augmented encounters based on the prompts and the artworks. So through the AR, museum visitors using the Adobe Aero app could hold up their phone to view an artwork, which you can see pictured here in the slide. A button that the students designed would appear on screen, which users could press to hear the voice of a student posing their participatory prompt. So for those who were unable to access the app or the physical museum space, we also created a collaborative website to host these critical encounters that was modeled after the Woman House site. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So for example, one group selected this small print and engraving from 1591 titled The Discovery of America. So for their AR encounter, they developed a participatory prompt. What narrative is the artist trying to portray about the discovery of America? What kinds of perspectives are missing from this narrative? So while the image itself aligns with white settler narratives depicting what's now called North America as a place that was undiscovered until European arrival, the AR activity provided students with the opportunity to glitch or disrupt colonial master narratives. So the students collectively discussed the relationships between art and imperialism. They recognized that indigenous perspectives were absent from this settler colonial narrative, and they asked participants in their public AR encounter to contemplate these absences as well. Next slide, please. Actually, if you could go to the next one, I think I got these out of order. Thank you. So another group selected this screen print by Yolanda Lopez titled Women's Work is Never Done. So in this image, in the upper left-hand corner, you can see this kind of trace image, ghost kind of figure of Dolores Huerta, who's a Chicana feminist labor activist, co-founder of the United Farm Workers Union with Cesar Chavez. So she's visible in the backdrop holding a sign declaring huelga, which means strike. And the image of Huerta is dated to 1965. So it's kind of hard to see in the screen, but it's in very light blue lettering in the upper left-hand corner. And then a group of Chicana women agricultural workers are present in the front of the composition. They're even breaking out of the picture plane and they're confronting the viewer, and they're all together in solidarity. In this portion of the screen print, it might be, again, hard to see, but in the upper right-hand corner, it's dated 1995. So this group's participatory prompt asks, if this artwork were updated today, what would it look like? What progress has or has not been made? So through their activation of the image through AR, the learners are glitching the erasure of the activist work of women of color, such as Huerta, and they glitch the assumption that feminist labor equity has been sufficiently achieved. So engaging this intersectional lens, Lopez's screen print and the students' AR encounter honor legacies of historical and ongoing feminist struggle. And they provide opportunities to speculate on possibilities for feminist labor futurity. Then if you could please go back to the Harlem Rose. Thank you. So another group selected this large wall-hanging sculpture by contemporary Black artist Willie Cole. It's called Harlem Rose. And this piece features women's shoes from the early to mid 20th century. They're centrally arranged like the layered, petals of a rose. Many of the shoes are visibly worn. They've got scuffs and wear marks on the soles. So through their research on the piece, this group of students learned that Cole chose these shoes to reference marchers from the civil rights movement. And their participatory prompt asks, why did Cole choose women's shoes specifically? And what kinds of conclusions can be drawn about the representation of Black women at the time? So it might be tempting to suggest that this work promotes empathy through the symbol of the shoe, asking the viewer to walk a mile in another person's shoes. But as Karen Keifer-Boyd writes, empathy alone does not foster social justice unless empathy decenters white, patriarchal, hegemonic norms. And I think this recognition is particularly significant in the context of my class as a white feminist and queer art educator working within this learning community of predominantly white, cisgender, middle-class undergraduate students in the Penn State community. Can we ever truly walk in another person's shoes? And how might privileged bodies claiming this ability perpetuate further harms against marginalized groups? How might pedagogical art encounters instead glitch harmful or superficial notions of walking in another's experiences? So Keifer-Boyd again asserts the need instead to promote critical empathy, which prioritizes, quote, encounters with difference in a way that decenters normative frames of reference to amplify the voices of marginalized groups. So the learners here glitch a superficial analysis of Cole's work by asking participants in their AR encounters to contemplate the lived experiences of the intersections of racism and sexism. And they are following Cole's mission to recognize and honor the transgenerational pain, labor, and resistance of Black women involved in social justice struggle in the U.S. context. You could go to the next. Thank you. So several students did encounter challenges using this AR technology. There's confusion and frustration about technological glitches and app crashes and things overall not going exactly as planned. Peers worked together to troubleshoot and experiment with the digital tools that were new to the majority of the group. I believe only one student of the 40 enrolled in my class had previously ever used augmented reality. And though we conducted many group-based activities and projects previously in the course, working together to problem solve in this project seemed to generate a higher degree of collaboration and engagement than some of the prior activities. So despite the students' frustrations with the AR's technological unfamiliarity and glitchy tendencies, glitches in the art education environment can actually become really productive sites, I think, for generating critical awareness of systems of power and dominant norms. So this project embodies what we're calling a glitch feminist art pedagogy, which seeks to raise learners' critical consciousness through encounters with feminist cultural producers and disruptors. And ideally, experimental activities can enable students to become feminist disruptors themselves. So this is something I'm really heavily exploring in my current ongoing dissertation research. Glitch feminism particularly reflects the increasing blurriness between the physical and the digital. So using a tool like AR to generate feminist interventions is a really fitting tool for glitch feminist art pedagogy, as augmented reality is really bridging these gaps between physical space and virtual space. And also, glitch feminism's citational politics, like Karen mentioned, centers multiply marginalized voices and bodies, which serves as a really vital pedagogical model for glitching the normalization of whiteness in our education and the centering of, white, cisgender, and heterosexual women in mainstream and popular feminism. So through these multimodal encounters with artists and activists' works, we seek to allow for a multiplicity of voices and perspectives and knowledges to emerge in the learning environment, including those belonging to students. So we invite you to use the QR code here, and you can visit our Woman House site that we created if you'd like to explore more of the Woman House stories, the augmented encounters, And you can also leave comments and feedback. We've set that up as a feature on the site. So please share your experiences on the site.
Well, thank you, Maggie Rose. And we just have, about 5 minutes for comments and discussion. I'm going to unpause our recording and do another screen share here. And there's several people that are going to that have joined me in this project and are here today to talk further. Also, other comments or things that you think about in any of these topics, please add to the chat here. So we're going to switch topics here to social justice art education with Linda Stein's art. And can you see the screen here? Do you see the website? Everybody checking thumbs up. Okay, great. And so on this site here, first to begin with, to introduce a little bit about Linda Stein, a feminist artist and activist, identifies as feminist and educator, and is also the founding president of the nonprofit Have Art Will Travel for Courageous Kindness, addressing bullying and diversity. And with Linda Stein in 2015, we established this, we call it the C team, but it stands for a curriculum team, to develop curriculum with Linda Stein's art. And beginning in 2015, besides Linda Stein, Sherry Ehrlich, Ann Holt, who's here, Wanda Knight couldn't make it today, and Julien will be here a little bit. I don't think he's here yet. Deddy Perez de Miles, I see you're here. Wonderful. And so, and then Linda Hepner-Poling has joined just this year, and we'll add a little bit too. So we began these encounters with one of her series. And if I go to the encounters here, you can also see them through the screens here, but it's actually this one here, the Holocaust Heroes, Fierce Females. But she continued to create these series, and they're linked under here. And we held a workshop in July 2016 and connected to a grad class. And then we continued to develop this. We got the National Art Education Foundation's grant to kind of assess the impact of this particular curriculum. And in schools, traveled all over Oregon and so on. And then have continued and sort of reforming, and people joining the C team and what they might be able to do or bring it to the site. And so what I want to do is particularly focus on the sexism series and kind of show you how the encounters these are all with different series and of Linda Stein's work. They connect sometimes to a lot of other artists' work with we call them encounters because they're not prescribed lessons, but they're encounters with the art that any teacher can then take these ideas and connect it to the very specifics and particulars of their class, the age, the group of students that they have. So at each one, there's like one of the works in the series, but there being a series, there's a lot in the series. So there's a link to see the whole series here. And then underneath are these different encounters here. And these can grow, these can, change, they can, if we, as they're tried out, examples and actual lesson plans can be connected to these larger topics. But for instance, well, first, sexism, the stereotyping and discrimination based on gender is confronted in Linda Stein's series, Sexism. And stories of women are being told to put their legs together to take up less space, and their defiant response, and that's just legs apart. And she interviewed people in these stories. And so there's also these videos linked in here to hear the artist and, how this impacted her for the rest of the life. And I have stories of even more recent times of just how these socialized behaviors get passed on. And sometimes it's how we move our bodies through the space, and sometimes without thinking about how we're teaching. It's not necessarily sexism, but it is when you're ridiculed for having such a thing as your legs apart. Tango, according to Erin Manning, an author I just love, is an exchange of movement and touch about a transnational negotiation of desire of gender roles in communication, end of quote. And and there's a 9-minute video here of Linda Stein talking about one artist says tango is egalitarian, and really, like, is it, and so there's a lot of questions about the art of tango, and as a, it's a certain attitude, it's a way of life, understood in some of the writings about tango of diverse cultures. And so there's a lot of direction of this particular tapestry that's called Laureen Arbus says tango is egalitarian. She always adds a number to it, to her works as well. I have another encounter on there called Extinguished Gaslighting. And as we know, and so much gaslighting is very prevalent today, it's an abusive process of psychologically manipulating a person into doubting their self-worth and their sensory knowing and their perceptions. And so once we're aware of gaslighting, we can help to extinguish its harmful psychological impact, although it's much more difficult to actually change the gaslighter. So artists such as Linda Stein in her series here help us recognize gaslighting. And once recognized, there's some ways that if you encounter her work, you can talk about particularly the gaslighting phrases that are in her work, and how those are, you've heard those, or whatever phrases that you have heard that it made you doubt yourself, basically. And the data visualization encounter has to do with a particular work of Linda Stein in this series called November 6, 2015 New York Times, and really looking at it basically brings together a lot of data about who is representative as artist and who is absent as artist. And so it's a data visualization artwork in and of itself, or can be seen in that way. And then there's some other resources along with that. And with that, I want to turn it over to Anne, if you would give us a sense of your involvement with this, and I can really stop sharing here as you talk, or you can share as well if you'd like. And we'll go Ann Holt, and then Adeti Perez de Miles, and then Linda Hepner-Poling. And the three of you, there are others perhaps, but let me see if there's others, but those are the ones that I know that I see right here. So Anne, if you might want to, I've kind of asked the group to respond to three questions. So why social justice art education? Why Linda Stein's art? And why use this social justice art education website, since you've been involved in creating it? So Anne?
Okay. Maybe, Karen, if we could, because I didn't create slides, but if we could maybe pull up the website, Stein Studio website, and maybe pull up something with the displacement, or from home. I think that would work. So hi, everyone. It's nice to see such a nice turnout for this event. I am an assistant professor in art education at Penn State, and I was previously teaching in the New York City area, and in the beginning of that, from 2017 to about 2015 to about 2017, I had the honor to work for Linda at Stein Studios. And so I'm kind of going to be addressing a little bit about maybe why Linda Stein's art, and I'm glad that Karen went over the website first, because I'm kind of looking at these other two questions about Linda Stein and then why social justice art education. And so I'm also going to draw a little bit from some of the conversations that Linda and I would have in the studios. But to get to why social justice art education, it's really artists that can help to the perspectives of artists who are dealing with social justice issues, that they can help reinforce upstander actions and ideas that are involved with social justice issues. And they can also support us as teachers, because it's not always easy to be an upstander, especially depending on the kinds of contexts where we work. So Stein's art and perspective contextualized in our many discussions over the 2 years that we worked together. There were always discussions around social justice and contemporary issues of violence happening domestically and globally. And they always connected with feminist theories that approach the world crises from a perspective of both individual experiences and needs. And holding to the idea that suffering and violence in the world can be lessened through tolerance, kindness, empathy, and understanding, rather than approaching the other with continued violence and ongoing suffering. And it's especially interesting how her work, in some ways, it's unfortunate that it has this timeless impact, because we are dealing with issues that shouldn't be happening in the world, and it's only gotten worse. So thinking, we're 6 years later from working with Linda, it's actually the refugee situation and war and violence is just even more in our day-to-day. So her work is central to the current global situation facing refugees and marginalized others, and it draws crucial attention to individual and collective responsibilities toward ending violence. So for decades, her art has emphasized protection and focused on social justice perceptions of the other and against continued forms of aggression or misrepresentation. She covers multiple media and materials and aesthetics, as you see here. So that's another great opportunity in the classroom, because she's not stuck in one type of material. And the impact through materials is also important with students, and also in terms of encountering the art. So I want to just share one example. When I was working with Linda, she had her Fluidity of Gender series that was going to the Holter Museum in Helena, Montana, which is quite a small city in a very conservative state. And so there, I'm going to just read a piece of a text that I wrote about the impact upon the Fluidity of Gender series going to for this exhibition. So upon opening the Fluidity of Gender crates to prepare for the exhibition installation, museum staff member Paige Farrow encountered Stein's sculpture and became inspired to prepare a presentation for the artist's reception and opening. Farrow braved her fears and came out to a full audience of museum goers, family, and friends, sharing her difficult journey to accepting and embracing her own queer gender identity, resisting societal norms of her upbringing in the Rocky Mountains of America. Farrow shared her story to empower others to be authentic to themselves, to raise awareness in those situated outside of this experience, and to foster empathy toward those oppressed by conforming to labels that do not fit one's own authentic self. And she came out to an audience, and her husband was in this audience as well. He knew that she was going to be doing this. But so the impact of just being able to be inspired to be an upstander is something that is a part of Linda Stein's work, and one reason why it's influential in using it for teaching. So I'm going to read here just what Linda Stein said about authenticity. As a feminist, lesbian, Jewish artist and activist, Stein sees the search for personal authenticity as a lifetime journey. So she says this: I am so engaged now with the word other, being the other, trying to fit in with the crowd so not to be viewed as the other, being hateful to the other so to blend in with the desired group, wishing to be another because one is not good enough, losing oneself with popular or celebrity types are around. For me, becoming authentic involves thinking beyond myself and my position in my macro or micro world. By focusing on another individual or group, I become more in tune with my priorities as the decent human being and citizen I want to be. So I think Karen talked about the 4 B's, I believe, bullied, bystander, brave, upstander, which were coined by Linda Stein. And she was using these terms as a starting point in discussing issues of how strength and power may translate into empathy and protection. She said, I see so many of us struggling to stand out amongst our peers as children and as adults, and I want to move people to consider this very positive and constructive way of getting acclaim. As I continuously relate this to my own childhood, I feel that if there were someone who planted this seed in me as a youngster and showed me how satisfying it would feel to be an upstander, I would have taken pride in that kind of standing out. And moreover, in my most guilt-laden episode of childhood, I wouldn't have been a part of a group that bullied a new girl at school. Still to this day, I feel remorse for not being the one who stuck up for a new kid on the block. So she's referencing a story in her childhood. So Stein sees this critical need for discussing the role of the brave upstander, and she's brought this idea within the context of her art. She's also more than a contemporary artist. She spent 7 years as a high school art teacher on Long Island, and another 7 years as an artist in residence within the school district. And she also spent 25 years as a founding president of a calligraphy business in Manhattan. So she has teaching experience across the board. So her art is pedagogical, and she, as an artist, is also understands teaching, which is why she has a nonprofit called Have Art Will Travel. So it's really an artist who's driven to education and fostering empathy. And I'm just going to end with this on what she says about empathy. To be empathetic means to take the focus off oneself and to think about a person other than oneself. Empathy has to be a part of that. I can't think of how one really can be paying attention to the other and not have empathy for them. Empathy isn't just thinking about the other, it's being aware and thinking about them with love and care. And I think it's important just to end on that note, because if that is really kind of the crux of why we're doing what we're doing. It's not a simple act to spread kindness and love and care.
Well, thank you, Anne. And I want to move right over to Aditi to jump in here now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aditi Perez de Miles, and I am at Texas State University. I'm a professor here and also the Art Education Program Coordinator. So the question, why social justice art education? Why Linda Stein? Why the website? So I can say that the social justice art education, Stein's art, and also the website compels us, by that I mean researchers, art educators, scholars, to look critically at systemic oppression in the educational context. From this work, we art educators can begin to assess school policies and practices. We could look at the curriculum or instructional materials to ensure equitable education for every learner. It's been a long time since we've met with Linda, and when I was at a previous institution, I invited Linda to deliver a keynote with poet Leah Lax. And I also curated an exhibition based on her art at the Biblical Museum of Art in Dallas, Texas. When we did the exhibition, we also curated programming, museum education programming for K-12 school students, and there was a really large turnout of her work. The work that began with the C team is what I want to focus on a little bit. So the work that the C team did with Linda Stein became the springboard for my latest co-authored book with Karen Keifer-Boyd, with Wanda Knight, with Sherry Ehrlich, with Jen Yulin, and Holt. And in this book, we explore and analyze the power and the politics and the possibilities that enable affirmative pedagogical practices. From the work and from the grant that we received to look closer at the work that Linda Stein was doing, again, we came up with this book, and in our analysis, we developed six principles for social justice art education. The first one was to investigate systemic oppression. The second one was to inspire decolonial actions. Third, to decenter white patriarchal power. Fourth, to disseminate power differentials. Fifth, to include difference. And sixth, to become upstandards to injustice. There are, of course, many ways to do this with the principles in our writing, in our teaching, and in our art. But what I wanted to do today is I wanted to read an excerpt from our book that inspired decolonial action as a means to decolonize the curriculum. So this work was, again, inspired by the work that the C team did with Linda Stein, specifically the commitment to become an upstander to injustice. So I'm going to read from our book from page 4. So this particular play script is based on my experiences as an art teacher in my attempt to decolonize the curriculum, to make room for plural voices and the histories, to enact social justice and to promote critical thinking. So I'm going to start reading. So the title of it is Unsettling the Settlers Reading List. So scene 1, the bell rang loudly. Suddenly, students rushed through the hallway, chattering, hurrying to meet up with friends to go to lunch. Miriam walked in the art classroom, slammed 2 books on the desk, walked to the back of the room, proceeded to get a lump of clay from the bin, threw it down on the table with great force, repeatedly folding and pushing the clay with the heels of her hands. Art teacher: are you having a rough day today, Miriam? Hi, sorry, I did not see you. Yes, not feeling great. I have been assigned to read The Scarlet Letters or Death of a Salesman, and they both suck. Art teacher: I remember reading those books in college. It took me a little while to get into them, but I ended up enjoying them. What kinds of books or authors do you like? Miriam, which by the way is a pseudonym. Miss, the thing is, I have to select one of these books for my senior term paper. I spent days reading Death of a Salesman and later switched to The Scarlet Letter, and they are old and boring. I wanted to use a different book, but my English teacher keeps telling me that it is not on her approved list of books for the senior term paper. Art teacher: what is the title of the book you want to use for your term paper? Student: Bless Me Ultima. Ah, Rodolfo Anaya would be a great author to include in the list. What was your favorite part of the story or favorite character in the book? Student: La Curandera. She reminds me of my grandma. I also liked all the unexplained things that happened in the story. Teacher: I wish I had Ultima's knowledge of medicinal herbs. The 7-year-old protagonist is my favorite. The section where he pretends to be a priest and absolves his friends from all sins is fabulous. There's actually an entire genre in literary and visual art called magical realism that uses magical, unexplained kinds and acts that happen to tell a story. Student: I really like that part as well. Art teacher: is your dad picking you up after school today? He was looking for you on Friday. He usually finds you in the art room, but you were not here. Student: yeah, he forgot. I was supposed to spend the weekend with my mom. Art teacher: have you talked to your dad about what's going on in about your term paper? Student: no. Art teacher: I recall speaking to your English teacher, Miss Smith, and she was very happy that your dad volunteered to run the cash register during the book fair last year. Student: She really likes my dad. Scene 2. The following Friday, the student's dad comes over to my classroom and he says, I wanted to stop by and thank you for suggesting that I reach out to Ms. Smith, our teacher. I suggested that Miriam let you know what was going on with her term paper. I'm glad that it worked out. Student's dad. She was happy to talk to you about her favorite book and that you liked it as much as she did. I was just telling the principal that Miriam is now very excited about her term paper. In fact, she is interviewing her grandmother for the final project. Our teacher. How did the principal get involved? I thought to myself as I started to look at the book list. Miriam's dad. I'm glad that Ms. Smith reconsidered and added Bless Me Ultima to her book list. Teacher. Me too. I look forward to talking to Miriam about her term paper and especially her interview. The art teacher facilitated an action to decolonize the curriculum, which is the focus of the work that we do in a social justice art education. And some of the questions that I asked in this chapter, as I begin to write this chapter, is, for example, what hierarchies and interests do I serve via the content of my courses and teaching? Whom do my curriculum practices and pedagogy benefit, and whom do they disadvantage? Who are the most cited, used, and circulated authors and artists in my curriculum and classes? And last, how do I disrupt or reify Eurocentrism and white privilege in my writing and teaching? And I think that, the work that we did as a C team and as we began to build the curriculum for the website in our engagement with Linda Stein, this is some of the work that was a springboard from the work that we did with Linda Stein in her visit to my institution, in the exhibition that I curated, and in her presentations of her work. These systems are always at the forefront of the work that she's doing: how to investigate systemic oppression, how to decenter gender inequalities. And most importantly, I think that one of the things that is really important for me for the work that Linda Stein does is how do we become upstandards to injustice, whether it's through decolonizing the curriculum, through being supportive with the people that we are working with. Creating networks is a very important part of the work that Linda Stein does. So I wanted to share with you the influence on my work and my teaching in working with Linda Stein.
Thank you, Aditi. Really great with Anne. But Linda, we actually only have 1 minute left. I tried to show your work here and also the awards. So the other part of the feminist activism is creating an archive from Linda Stein's work. Anne Holt was a big part of that. And research, you can do a proposal for a research with the archives, and for the 3,500 is that award. And then I also was showing the comics. But I also am showing Linda Hepner-Pulling here. If you can just say just a couple minutes, because we have a lot for the next hour as well.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, everybody. By the way, I'm in a hotel lobby, just finished up a conference here for my state association. Thanks, Karen. My name is Linda Hepner-Pulling. And in addition to the curriculum that I wrote, centering, Linda Stein's artwork and social justice art education, I was lucky enough to bring Linda Stein to Kent State to teach a special topics course that centered Linda's work. And what was so exciting about this, not only to bring Linda there, and it's still ongoing. She'll be virtually with us again on November 30th, but I was able to bring in a variety of social justice minded individuals. Karen will be joining our class next week, but a lot of guest speakers that, make this a truly engaging course in so many entryways to talk about social justice art education. So the art educators in the course, as well as some studio majors, some art history, and I do have one anthropology major, how they're applying it to their own disciplines. They're all learning to be upstanders. And the way they're doing that is centering it through Linda Stein's work. It's been incredible. So I know we're going to move on to that next topic, but to be able to do this special topics course has just been transformative. So thank you, Karen. Oh, you're muted. Yep.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, sorry about that. There's so much on the site, and you can see I've clicked to some of the things that Linda was talking about, but also to celebrate that Linda was awarded to dive into that archive, and so that Linda Stein Archive Award. So congratulations again, Linda, but also your talk about that is linked on this site as well. Now we're going to move. We didn't have time for comments, so you're just going to have to put them in the chat. Hopefully we'll pick up on some time to bring, further questions and comments, but please do add to the chat. There's can be, conversation going on. I'm going to switch this now to a topic about Wikistorming. And so there are several people that are joining me here, Alida, Altundas. I've got a video from Burchak, Gazarogla with another last name added, Christensen, and Leslie Sotomayor. I'm not sure if you're here, but yet Penshun Singh. And these are the groups that or several that will talk about their experiences of Wikistorming. But let me tell you a little bit what it is. And you can see, I'll try to pop this into the chat here too, so you can poke around a little bit in it as I'm presenting. So this is just an archive. I got a little bit of grant from the Art Plus Feminism organization now that just began with 2 or 3 people sitting together and coming up with this idea. And now it's, all these 6 different continents and all over the world that there's been nodes of this Art Plus Feminism in the past 10 years. But there was a 10th anniversary, or it is the 10th anniversary now. And that funding was able to go to Burchak to help me edit some of the videos from the talks and stuff so that this site now becomes, is not only the annual activism, feminist activism, but the culmination of 10 years builds quite a resource of presentations and ideas and things that actually change Wikipedia. So I began, like I said, about, 2014. And really an alumni had asked about, are we going to have a node here? And it had only begun the year before. But I had been involved with FemTechNet, this open group that we developed curriculum and such, and lots of different things. And we were already working to what we called Wikistorming, where we go into Wikipedia, we see what's missing, what's absent, misrepresentation, and how we might be able to change it. So I'm also, in presenting here, I want to encourage, we created this site so I could give you some sense of how to facilitate a node in your community, at your university, with your group, so it's more than just the idea is that a lot of people are doing this. This living archive, if you see the history, we have each of these histories. And again, I'm going to keep working on this, but some of the earlier ones we don't have recorded because we weren't using Zoom and we didn't have the technologies as much. But as we get on to the later ones somewhere around in here, especially 2020, where we really switched over here, you will see the different recordings that you need to click and then do large screen, and you'll hear the recording. There's a poster, but I also tried to, on each site and each year, I also haven't completed it totally, but I also do some keywords so you kind of know what's going on here, a little bit about what happened, but also just like in the other areas, a prompt or question like how is feminist art that includes needlework presented in art history textbooks, courses, and on Wikipedia. So there's something, we had Susan Hill, which sort of orchestrated the tapestry areas of the in the dinner party project with Judy Chicago, was a guest there. As time went on, there was, and it was interesting when her looking at her younger self in the dinner party video. So there's pretty much some, interesting archival work within here. But I would like to open up more time for discussion here, but particularly bring in Elida. You were early on. If you would like to say a few words about your experiences with that. And as you talk, I'll kind of poke around some of the images unless you had something else particular that you wanted to show.
Yeah, so I actually have a short presentation, if that's okay.
Absolutely. It should be able to just click to the screen.
It's for 7 minutes, and I hope that will be okay, and I will just share a few things. Yeah. So, and I'm going to try to make this work again with the, are we seeing the full screen?
Yeah,
okay. So I think by now I was looking at the room and seeing familiar names. So it's so great to see everyone. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak about the work that we've done at Penn State, Karen. It was always an empowering experience for me. So I just really want to talk about that shortly. So to me, so I want to start with what is art plus feminism Wikistorming, right? So when I started working with Karen on Wikistorming events, it was always a very powerful movement for me because it was my first time actually learning about editing on the Wikipedia platform. But this movement, in my eyes, it always aimed to address the gender gap in digital spaces, and particularly, of course, on Wikipedia. And I just kind of want to emphasize what we did, and just want to highlight this as a space where feminism and digital activism was intersecting. And it has been truly a significant part of my professional and personal growth starting in 2019, I believe. So this was my very first presentation, and it was my very first contribution to Wikipedia. So my journey started with understanding Netheims and von Wendel's work. These are two German woman sound artists, and I was trying to find their work. I had a book that through some resources from Europe, but on the website, on the web-based platform, there was really nothing. So it was about really introducing their playful imagination-based work, and their work challenging the male hegemony, of course, and how they're just being represented in Wikipedia. And but then really including this work for me was to make this broader implication to the feminist activism. But so I'm going to kind of just do this back and forth storytelling. So one of the other ways that I contributed to the Wikistorming event was also assisting Dr. Keifer-Boyd in organizing the conferences and the sessions and the flyers and these posters. And I want to talk a little bit about the design, because we would discuss and talk about these lines and what it really means. And so here are some of those designs that I created. And I just want to share, each of these pieces were crafted with the intent to inspire and communicate our core values. Meaning, so the purpose of Wikistorming is to get together and come together, right? So, and in that kind of coming together, the lines that you're noticing are crisscrossing and intertwining across the poster. So they're not just random patterns, they're the heart of the message. Each line is representing one of us, our paths, ideas, and contributions, converging to enrich that collective knowledge on Wikipedia. So I just kind of wanted to share that too. And so a couple of things that I think it's important to mention, the experiences and challenges. So doing this work is not easy. So the Wikipedia platform is a very complicated platform. It's not just for us to go in there and then put the information. And a lot of the times we would run into challenges. So one of those aspects is, so in my involvement in editing or even creating and starting a whole new page involves a lot of steps. So working in this platform, our goal is to put the missing information about women. Often, to me, actually felt like it was a battle against surveillance and control almost on a certain level. So the other editors would frequently scrutinize and sometimes oppose the information we try to actually include. So, and these editors, they can be professionals, and, you know, these are individuals from across the globe. They're not just from these small communities. And many of whom are passionate guardians, I would call, of guardians of information. And this is how they also identify themselves. But yet their anonymity can sometimes cast a shadow of impersonality over that collaborative process I'm actually talking about. So these are just experiences. And so here are a couple just screenshots from my other presentations in 2019, 2020, 2021. I think I've done it 3 times. And so getting pages, again, just speaking of that, improved wasn't always straightforward. And despite these challenges, we persevered, knowing the importance of our goal to increase the visibility and recognition of women's contributions in various fields. So the challenges are not always, so, you know, I don't want this to be perceived as a negative kind of like maybe approach, but what happens is a lot of the times our work, so just going back to this slide, I want to show something. Okay, here. So on the left, we're looking at, so I think I added this in 2021, and I just looked at the page today. So what happens is a lot of the times our informations would get deleted, but then other editors will continue working on this page and we'll just keep adding information, and the page continues growing, but there's always a note that they will just say, you know, this page still needs improvement. It looks like it's a personal reflection, personal essay. So I am just sharing this as just to provide what that working process is like. And just as a final, I have just a short thought to leave to you all to think about. And so, and also it's kind of just a conclusion in my experience with the art feminism Wikistorming. So it has been a truly transformative experience for me, Karen, and I'm always so grateful for you including me in these sessions. So I'd like to leave you today with a thought. How can we further leverage visual communication to amplify feminist activism? So I would love to discuss this in the future or even here. If you have any questions or anything to add to the chat, please feel free to do that. But in my conclusion and with my journey to art feminism Wikistorming, this process teaching me not only about the power of digital activism, but it was also about the complexities of implementing real change, right? So today, especially, we often speak about diversity, equity, inclusion, and this whole idea of DEI. And I'm hearing, especially, so I was in Texas last year, and I hear now there's a new policy and law that the DEI words are not allowed to be used in the classroom settings. But so when we speak about justice, when we face with the real world situations, there's a noticeable hesitation to take the necessary steps, right? How do we actually take these steps to make the real change? So yeah, I guess that's just where I want to kind of leave. And thank you all for listening. And I am so eager to hear your thoughts if you have any, and you can put them in the chat. Yeah. Thank you, Karen.
Beautiful. I have a Penshan, you're going to be right after. I'm going to do Burchak. I'm going to share my screen here because Burchak couldn't be here, but created this very nice 2-minute presentation about her involvement in the Wikipedia. And
Hi everyone, my name is Munira Burchak Gezaroglu, and in March 2023, I participated to the Art Plus Feminism Wikistorming event to edit the Women in Games page on Wikipedia. Briefly, Women in Games is a UK-based non-profit organization that strives to develop countermeasures to what are unacceptable behaviors in games and esports, since the games industry remains as the most gender imbalanced of all creative industries. This was the organization's Wikipedia page, and it gave a very brief definition of what they do. I wanted to add information about the annual Women in Games festival they run and their wide range of award categories, as well as their representative organizations in many other countries like in Turkey, Romania, Norway, France, and many more. And through collaborative editing, we added these sections to their Wikipedia page. We also added the organization's representatives in other countries in the form of a list, thinking that this would be a good start to create separate pages for these organizations in the future. Overall, this was an empowering experience for me since I had no prior experience in editing an existing Wikipedia page nor creating one. Wikipedia had been a tool that I was so used to running across in nearly all my Google searches that I didn't really question the editors and the authors of its content and what they're creating. So the Wikistorming event was helpful in questioning what I had considered normal before and recognized the power in learning to edit and create Wikipedia content collaboratively. However, I also learned that this is a back and forth process as what we edit might later be taken out, which emphasizes the importance of the ongoing feminist activism. Thank you for listening.
Well, it felt like Burchak was there the way. And Pinshan, let's just move right to you, and then we'll hopefully have maybe 10 minutes for a discussion.
Yeah, thank you. I only need two minutes.
Perfect.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Pinshan. In start as 2016, I facilitated a lot of workshops about like letters. The naming of I create a Wikipedia letters, change the menu is from Karen. So I appreciate Karen give these presentation names. In this activism, we have a lot of art action, including put sticker on cafeteria menus. The method sparked a lot of conversation and drew considerable attention, but it's only in Taiwan. So in the wiki event, I want to document our journey on the Wikipedia page. Our feminist action gained a lot of attention in 20 newspaper articles, amplifying our message across global and the media platform. However, we haven't documented the term on Wikipedia. So in the Wikipedia event workshop, we focus on how the letters page. Here, we want to incorporate detail of our action and journey in Mandarin and in English. So it is about like the journey, but the most important, we create the Wikipedia page finally. So this is last year. I'm fortunate we can have the event in person. So we have a lot of different food from, I think it's from different culture because Yeso and I from Asia. So we bring a lot of food from like United States and Asia food. The event for me was empowering. It provided me a platform to feel valued and supported with the feminist community. You can see a lot of people around the table, and we are from different cultural framework, even we speak a different language, but we are in the same space at the same time. So the Wikipedia page is this one. Also. Yeah, so you can see it's a two different language. I just post Mandarin and English because the community is not just a Western culture. We include different cultural people in the feminist community. We open up a discussion about the topic. For instance, why the vegetable named Chinese girl and why the vegetable the letters have a privilege naming with gender and race. I feel the Wikipedia offers a deeper understanding of this issue, and I reflect on this issue to have more collaborative opinions. despite encounter several technical difficulties at the event, we figure it out together. And I love this collaborative and cooperative, supportive vibe in this event. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. So our last topic for this National Art Education Women's Caucus celebration 50th anniversary of 4 different ways in going about feminist activism. And so one of the ways, if everyone can see the website here in a moment, we'll have several people presenting here about their work and engagement with this journal, Visual Culture and Gender. But I want to begin about the act of creating the journal itself was an act of feminist activism. And it was born almost 2 decades ago, 2005. It was the first multimedia online journal in the field of art education and the first online journal devoted to visual culture and gender. And as co-founders and co-editors, Deborah Smith-Shank and I, we conceptualized visual culture and gender as this online and international and freely accessible. These were very important points to what we wanted to do to make this accessible. However, it's gotten to a recognition so much now that it is in several databases. So it's found within library searches and other databases, as you know, several that the libraries use. I don't need to name them, but they are on here, especially if you look for the authors and the readers in these areas here. Let's see, I'll go to the archives and kind of scroll here as I'm talking. And so one of the things is well, Debbie and I poured our hearts and minds and energies into creating these visual culture and gender as a scholarly journal. And some of the pushback was because at that time in 2005, being an online journal, is it considered scholarship? So I said the recognition of visual culture gender, there's a feminist art history biennial conference that comes out of the American University in Washington, D.C. And there was 2 journals that they chose for their publisher table. And one was the Women's Art Journal that has been around for 5 decades. And then the other one was our journal, Visual Culture and Gender. I've never been to the conference. I don't know any of the people. And here they, found this journal, Visual Culture and Gender, and wanted to invite us to the publisher table to talk about the journal. And I just remembered too, as I'm showing this, that, Yen and I have had put together a PowerPoint here that I guess just a couple slides that might be a little bit easier. There's like 5 slides there. I'm going to share that real quickly here. Let's see, there it is. 4 different presentations trying to remember. Yes. So you see our first business card, Debbie Smith-Shank and I are the co-founders here. And then Yen, I believe you are there right here. And if you want to say a few words, you joined as an editor, an associate editor, as Debbie Smith-Shank retired. And here I'm alone in doing this, and so kindly joined. Are you there to say a couple words about you coming in as the associate editor and what you do?
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Yan Julin. So I joined VCG, I think it was probably in 2016 or 15, maybe 16. So at the time, I think that was a time when when the VCG was trying to move to a different kind of web page, I think at that time. So I kind of moved, my first task was to move the whole VCG to a new this open journal system, and using that to facilitate this submission process. So that was my first experience of participating in the editorial process. So it was it has been fun. And seeing how this VCG grow to work with the authors and the reviewers. Well, it has been quite a journey.
Yeah, and I just, want to encourage, I mean, we saw a need and we wanted to make something accessible and just did it. And, you have an idea, an initiative, but you have to carry through on that initiative and carry it through for many years. So like I said, we're on to our 19th volume, but along the way, Debbie Smith-Shank and I think we were at a conference sort of writing on napkins and stuff, but came up with our collective identity, which is hyphen unpress, and there's lots to reasons for that, but that becomes part of our identity, a collective identity for this journal. Just a couple things about how we have been defining gender in this journal, and there's a lot with this information on the journal site itself. But we see gender as multifaceted and complex and includes issues of race and social economic status and aging and discourses of abuse and love for oneself and others. And one of the most interesting things about we call it BCG as our nickname for it or acronym for it, is while we don't take thematic calls for the paper, the articles, they work individually, but together sort of are as a gestalt of the time in which they were published. So there's a real interesting looking, back at each of these years. And our editorial really reflects upon the issues and things that have happened in that year. And so there's while the articles, and we're going to hear from a couple of the authors here, are relevant for into the future, well into the future, they actually do capture a lot of really relevant issues of the time. So I've got a couple of things on the screen here about just sort of ways of defining gender as both a lived and symbolic relationships of power, and gender body politics concern exclusion and marginalization. And feminist research praxis emphasizes gender justice and starts from the premise that gender and sexuality intersect with other identity aspects historically conditioned by social and political power. So, a lot more to be said there, but just to give a little sense of how we're thinking about gender in this journal. And then, Yen, you were going to say a little bit about some of the areas that we have. And we also are looking at Maggie Rose's animation. And Maggie Rose, I think you're still here as well, which is one of the visual essays. Yen, would you like to add a little bit more about the journal and the different components?
Okay. So we have the submissions in VCG. We have research articles, visual essays, multimedia, and book reviews. We are a journal that really encourage the inclusion of not just many visual images, but also multimedia like this animation, such as film clips, also soundtracks in each article. And unlike other print journals that do not often include images in color, often because the cost of printing and the time for skilled labor, we do, because the VCG was born digital, it enables us to include multimedia and many images in color. And so, for example, a multimedia submission will be accompanied by a text of 500 and between 500 and 1,500 words, and also include an abstract, a description of images for those who use screen readers, and also a critical introduction to contextualize and summarize the purpose of the work for its significance from a visual culture and gender perspective. And of course, the methodology, which conveys the theoretically informed process in creating and composing the visual, sound, or other media employed in the work.
Yeah, thank you. And then before we hear from the others, I actually just want to encourage you. Every November 15th is when is our deadline for the submissions for the next year. And every September 15th for 18 years now, we're going on to our 19th. For 18 years, we have met that date of getting the journal published on September 15th, thanks to Yen and all the authors and Debbie Smith-Shank earlier. It's like giving birth every September 15th, but it also happens to be Yen's birthday. And during the process of this journal also gave birth to three wonderful little boys there too. So there's a lot of birthing going on in this journal in the process of creating it. But also I want to really at this slide here to really talk about how there is a great process of mentoring here and really trying. Sometimes I hear a presentation or hear a story from somebody and they don't really think about publishing or writing. Sometimes it's artwork that I see and encourage. And Debbie was on the lookout for this too. And, trying to reach people that maybe don't always get their voices heard in publications. And sometimes it's a mentoring of a couple years of feedback. The reviewers are incredible. Many of them are on here right now that have served as reviewers. They give such thoughtful and detailed kind of feedback that, and sometimes it takes a second cycle to actually get the work published. But I do think that different from other journals, which I can hear, many people, both peers and students say, just a flat rejection. They don't really know much why and such. So I think that that's a really important aspect of this. Now with this, I want to now change. Satya, I saw you here, and I think you have some slides to show, and I want to, so there you are. Yes, and so if you want to share your slides and tell a little bit, introduce yourself and about your article in here, and I just chose a couple people to invite, and I thought this is fascinating, your article, so please go forward.
Thank you so much, Karen, for the history of VCG and also for asking me to share my my research. So this article was published in VCG last fall. It looked at Mughal paintings from the 1700s depicting female homoeroticism and cross-dressing. So I'll begin with one of my, before I said, I'm not in art education, that's not my field. I am a historian and I teach history at the College of New Jersey. So I'll begin with this painting, which is one of my favorite ones in the article. So this was produced in the mid 1700s in North India. And like many Mughal paintings, it depicts an amorous couple who is the main subject. And it looks like a heterosexual couple, but if you look closely, we'll see that the partner on the right, she actually has red henna on her feet, and her diaphanous muslin blouse, reveals that she is female, and also her hair is tucked in under her turban, giving her a masculine look. And this painting shows how in Mughal art, romantic love was conceptualized. The garden setting with flowers and also red wine was a symbol, like the redness of the wine was symbolic of love's intoxication. So this painting was actually not very rare. If you look at, 1600s, 1700s Mughal paintings, there are many paintings like this, which show female couples and depict same-sex love, homoeroticism. And in some of them, like the one in the previous slide and here, we see one of the female partners is cross-dressed as a man. But there are other paintings where both the partners are dressed in feminine attire with jewelry. So these paintings, these three that we saw here, are part of a Mughal album that was produced in Awadh. Even though these paintings are now in London at the Victoria and Albert Museum, they were produced in the Mughal province of Awadh, which is here. And in 1765, the English East India Company was transforming from a trading power to a territorial power in India. They were acquiring more and more territories, and you can see here by 1857, they had acquired 2/3 of India. And in this process, they were also collecting art from South Asian rulers. And I mean, this collection or gifts as these art objects, they're passing to Western institutions. They were actually part of colonial loot throughout the 1700s and early 1800s, like from various parts of India. And in 1857, the British Crown, the British Parliament and the British Crown directly took over the rule of India from the hands of the East India Company. And after 1857, a series of laws were passed in India. So 1861, the British colonial legislation in India criminalized homosexuality, calling it against the law of nature. And this was actually not part of South Asian culture at all, like this kind of homophobia. It was modeled on medieval English concepts of homosexuality as a sin against the church and also sin against the king. And a decade later, the British colonial government introduced another law called the Criminal Tribes Act, which declared cross-dressing or transvestism as obscene, illegal, and even criminal. Right? So eunuchs and other gender ambiguous people who had an important role in South Asian, harems in Mughal households, often having political power, economic power, now they were disempowered and basically declared illegal people. And India, became independent about a century later in 1947. The British rule in India ended. India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, these emerged as, independent nation states. However, this idea of, homophobia got internalized by South Asian people themselves, even though it was a British colonial thing. And recently, in 2013, the Indian Supreme Court actually upheld the criminality of homosexuality. And in 2018, after a lot of activism by queer communities in India, the Indian Supreme Court finally decriminalized homosexuality, which basically they got rid of the British colonial law from 1861 that had declared homosexuality as against the law of nature and penalized it by death. However, despite the legal decriminalization in India, the religious right, Hindu and Muslim religious groups who normally fail to agree on anything, in this case, they argue that homosexuality is sinful, unnatural, and also interestingly, they argue that it is against Indian culture, and that homosexuality has been imported from the West. It's a corrupt import into India. And female couples in rural India, today, even though homosexuality is no longer a crime, they still face death threats, and some of them have even been murdered in so-called honor killings to protect the family's honor, because it's believed that this is an anti-Indian practice. This has never existed in India. It was imported from the West recently. So which is why these paintings are really important to study, these paintings from pre-colonial India, like before British colonial rule began. It's important to look at these paintings because they give us an idea about the long history of courtly patronage of same-sex love. And these were not part of fringe, marginal culture. These were produced in royal courts, patronized by aristocracy and royalty. However, these paintings most of them are no longer in India, but they are scattered in museums across Europe and North America. So studying these pre-colonial paintings of South Asian female intimacy is feminist activism, and in fact is decolonial feminist activism, because these paintings counter the narrative in India that we never had same-sex love, right? But these paintings remind us that this idea of homophobia was in fact not really South Asian, but homophobia was created because of British colonial rule. British law produced homophobia in South Asia, which still very much survives and is active. However, at the same time, I argue in my article that the lens of labor is also important because many of these, in many of these images and in poetry and literature, even though we find female couples and same-sex relations, we don't really know the degree of consent involved in these relations because most of them were, hierarchical relationships, mistress-maid relationships, right? It was often the maid-servants who could be enslaved, providing sexual labor to their mistresses. So these relationships were forged within complex domestic hierarchies, domestic slavery, and power dynamics. So it's important to keep that in mind so that we do not end up glorifying pre-colonial South Asia as some sort of a queer paradise. Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, wow. That beautiful. And I think people can get a sense of the range of kind of articles, just even from yours. But what I have here is 4 more people that if you could just, we only have like 10 more minutes, but we have Yen, if you wanted to show about the colors of resilience. So there was, and if, do you have slides for that you want to bring in? Oops, I think you're on mute. And then Shally, and then Indira, and then we'll end with Chrissy. And I know everyone is like, just try to keep like a couple minutes. And then what I think you're going to see the scope, but the next 3, I asked for essays, visual essays dealing with precarity in conversation. So they haven't actually really been in talking conversation, just in the writing conversation. So maybe we could begin. And Yen, are you able to share slides?
Yes. So I will share the work that was included in my short essay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is in this short essay that was included in Precarity in Conversation. I wrote this piece about the color of our resilience. This image may be familiar to many of you. It's a collaborative color play by me and my family during the pandemic. The photo, it shows my son and my husband holding both ends of a cardboard box, trying to get the little balls rolling against and over the color pens underneath. And in a way, I think it's described our struggles and resilience as an Asian family that is facing increasing hatred and bias toward Asian communities during the pandemic. As I wrote in the article, quote, "The boats did not always go the ways we want, neither did the mixing of the colors," end quote. I reflected on the fear of losing control and our strength of bouncing back from distress. It is a feminist activism that speaks true to our lived experience and brings to the front the voice that has been hidden away. I'll stop here.
Wonderful. Shally, do you have some slides or that you would like to share or just speak?
I mean, I can just speak. I have a picture of a drawing that I made, but I mean, it's you can all just click on the link and check it out yourselves if that is easier. Oh, well, I can talk about my piece. I was actually very grateful for this opportunity, like just to write about what was going on in the pandemic, and having precarity as a topic I thought was really interesting. And as I went over and reread some of the pieces to just refresh my mind, I realized how important this type of work is, because feminism, in a sense, we're fighting, like the quote unquote his story. So I was thinking of the importance of having our versions of our stories being told constantly. So feminism is a constant endeavor. It's not just like a thing that's out there. We have to be constantly working through it. So all these exercises, the Wikistorming, publishing in open access journals that reference both visual culture and gender, I feel like are on point. So I took this opportunity to showcase a story that wasn't necessarily mine, because I was thinking about migration statuses and people feeling precarious in terms of they're either belonging or not belonging to a particular territory. And I was in Mexico at the time, so I got to meet a wonderful person called Gracie Vecchionacci, and we were both part of a residency where we were working with people migrating. But she herself, it was an artist that had come from Venezuela as a refugee to Mexico. So I thought that her story could maybe open up the scope, because I mean, me talking as someone from Mexico, you know, the usual narratives about like the beasts who were working actually with people who had been on the train. So I just thought that maybe the drawing conversation could be something that could, I don't know, elicit more nuance in the conversation that we were having on the topic of migration, with her being someone who herself was a migrant. So that's what we did. We went to a local shelter and we had a conversation with a nun who was one of the representatives of the space. And I thought that they said something that really struck me. They said, todos necesitamos algo en que creer. Like everybody needs something to believe in. And I thought that that was really powerful, especially in a time where everything was uncertain, right? Like the precarity was also very much psychologically heavy. So I was also grateful for the opportunity to have this piece written in Spanish as well. So I feel like that's because somebody mentioned the importance of languages, and I think that's also a type of resistance that is happening. So, well, thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you. Indira, how about you?
Yes, I have a video I can share. I mean, PowerPoint I can share. Let's go to. Okay. So, like everyone else, thank you, Karen, for the opportunity. This was a journey for me. Make sure this is right. Okay. So in 2020, it started off as a wonderful year. I defended my dissertation in January and started having, looking for jobs and conducting interviews, and had finalists for many different opportunities, and COVID happened and everything just shut down. And of course that raised my anxiety and depression, and I'm like, what in the world am I going to do now? Because everything was every email I kept getting, I was like, we stopped the search. We canceled the search. And I was like, I started looking at how women of color were going for this, because the reactions were different. Well, most women of color jobs were not, you couldn't just not go to work, or you couldn't just, economically was just more of a disadvantage. So this article allowed me to look at, to look at how the impact of COVID on women of color. So this is one, and part of the article I brought about how Black and Hispanic women in particular have suffered some of the steepest spikes in unemployment and large drops of labor force participation rates since the pandemic began. And also this research also the report went into further that even after COVID, people still were not regaining, when things started to open back up, women of color still were not gaining their employment back, which became a concern for me, because I was trying to figure out, well, what is my next step? So I do what I usually do, and I start painting. And I started painting this image that I first showed you. Oh, I'm not going to go back. I had an artist residency in Panama a couple of years ago, so I started painting the portrait of her. And in Portobello, Panama, that's part of the UNESCO World Site. The yearly wage for a woman is approximately $4,000. And that meant that her options were either domestic work or as a cook for tourists. And as I'm painting this image of her, I'm thinking about myself, but I'm also thinking about, what is she going through? What kind of image, what kind of life is she experiencing? Because even then, the nearest grocery store was 35 minutes away. The nearest hospital was 45 minutes away. And even though I was still in the process of looking for employment, I felt I had more of a better opportunity than she did but as women of color, we're both in that same position, even though we were miles away from each other. So I thought about what type of resources does she have? This was the woman I met. She was the cleaner in the back of a general store. And I just thought about all the women that I met in Panama during that time frame when I was there. What about, we don't hear about the women in these countries and how are they handling the pandemic? So that was the basics of my my article, and also showing my artwork that I did during that time frame. That was it.
Thank you. Just gorgeous. Now we're going to move to Chrissy. Take your 3-5 minutes, whatever you have that you have ready for us.
Everybody see?
Yes.
So first, I just really want to thank Karen Keifer-Boyd, who is a lifelong mentor for me. I remember the moment because I did work with Deb Smith-Shank when this visual culture and gender phenomenal site for feminist activism was born. I remember because I was standing right next to Deb Smith-Shank in the School of Art and Design. So this has meant really, truly the world to me as a scholar and an artist in the field of art education. And I wanted to just focus on 3 points. I'm going to call VCG. But so I did a series of 3 articles published in 2006, published in 2008, and published in 2014 in visual culture and gender. And my work, for those of you who may not know, I've worked as an non-Maya, non-Indigenous painter and artist who was mentored by two Maya painters. The person I'll be talking about today is Paula Nicho Cumes. She's Maya Cachiquel. And so I studied painting with her in Guatemala. So the first way I would like to talk about this work is it's 2 decades long now, almost a quarter of a century. It's longitudinal work. It's, based in a kind of indigenous feminist relational way of knowing. And so one of the ways that VCG has been really formative for me is the editorial mentoring that Karen spoke of initially, that I received from both Karen and Deb Smith-Shank. That's the era that I published. And so for me, that was really important too, as somebody who then went on to review others' work. There was like a real focus on care. So I would say as a site of feminist activism, that would be my first. The top article was 2006. This was entitled Where Lived Experience Resides in Art Education, a Painting and Pedagogical Collaboration with Paula Nicho Cumes. And then in 2008, I returned to really explore further the ways that the complexity of representation from a non-Indigenous person representing Indigenous communities in a second language. And thirdly, 2014, VCG was the first place that allowed for video. And so I was able to really go first voice Maya artists to readers and viewers. And so this was a truly radical place to be able to really present. So, moving from that, I personally was going through like an ethical interrogation of my own research practice, as somebody who is, as I said, trying to represent voices that really, I'm non-Maya, I'm a white scholar, and moving and spending 20 years with artists, that really became an issue for me. So VCG as a feminist site enabled me to return to my work and to really question who elicits the excerpts from the artists, what choices do we make as researchers, and then how to bring those artist voices directly. But then people also questioned that's still an objectification of, let's say, Indigenous communities, to finally representing that work in video, which were the actual lessons and mentoring lessons where our relationship, mine as student with my teachers, was actually explicitly viewed. And so that was work that really transformed the ways that I was able to work in a way that was decolonizing. So second was, Karen and Deb just moved with me in this. They were totally receptive to my questions. Can I present this? Can I present that? To the point where this place became a way for me to change my work. Visual culture enabled me to go through the changes I needed to. And there was certainly no other journal that I could turn to for this and that would receive my work in this way. And lastly, I think Zali really, focused on this. I did collaborative ethnography. So the work was published in English and in Spanish. Again, Karen and Deb, VCG was the place that said, we want this, we seek this, we absolutely support this. And so I would go back to the artist before anything was published to get their permission. If they didn't want it in, it was taken out. And so the Spanish translation functioned as a site for collaborative ethnography, and VCG as a feminist activist journal enabled a decolonizing and decolonial practice. So, I really, and I plan, I have a next future iteration of the work to submit. So it's always ongoing, but this whole idea of longitudinal in the field of art education, it actually bucks the system, the patriarchy, and the kind of come in, take away. And, the colonial as well. So, just to thank you so much, Karen, and, for continuing. And of course, to the new, the new iteration of editing. Thank you so much.
Wow, that's, it's amazing when you stay with something and you listen and you, and how all of this can be different, very different ways of feminist activism. And so this session, and particularly with the presentations, conclude at this point, and I just really appreciate it. Like Enid is here, has been a reviewer, has contributed. Others on here too have, Kevin has been an author, and Adeti has been an author in Visual Culture and Gender Journal, but also in some of these other endeavors as well. And so while I'm going to conclude this particular, and definitely turn off the recording here and or pause it, and just thank everybody for being here in the presentation and sharing these ideas.